Feels like a while since I've done this, everybody. Right, okay, so what I have here, I've got 3 pieces of watercolour paper. I have some very strong coffee, some water, some coffee granules, water spray and some salt. So what I'd like you to do is, if I can stop my coffee from falling over, is to just play at covering your paper with the coffee. Okay, you can splat, you can go in more solid areas, you can sprinkle a little bit, don't go mad, you can use a little bit of salt. Okay, so that's 1 sheet done. That was hard, wasn't it? So try and make each one a little bit different. So obviously you're just splashing and flicking and what have you, so they are going to be a bit of a muchness, but maybe think about what's going on and try and make it look different, because you're going to be drawing on these later. There's a little bit of a spray to hopefully encourage it to give some softer lines. What I might actually do is try and put a little bit of that where there's no coffee as well, so it's just sort of white and grainy. So doesn't really matter what sort of coffee you use. This is the soft powdered stuff, but the ones like your regular Nescafe, where it's in sort of hard lumps, that can be, woohoo, this might be a little bit of a challenge. That can be good as well, because where they sit in the wet, they create, they dissolve a little bit and they create really intense tones. So that might be all right. Let's get some more splitty splatties on that one. A bit more diluted over here. Maybe again, add a little bit water. Try and get it to move around a bit, and a little bit of salt. And then what you'll do, you'll leave those to dry, and then I will show you the next stage. Do as many as you like. The more backgrounds that you create, the more likely you are to be pleased enough to work on one of them. Okay? Right, so here they are when they're dry. They have cockled a little bit. What you find is the granules of salt, they draw in the moisture, so I don't know whether you can see that there's a little bit of water hanging around on those. So what we need to do is get rid of the salt, and hopefully eventually they'll dry flat when they stop sucking in the moisture from the air. Okay, so the salt gives a really nice effect, as we all know from our watercolour experiments, but it also works well with coffee. So you can look at these, your backgrounds, and decide which one you want to work on. I quite like this because it's dark. This is a little bit more subtle. This has got quite an exciting area going on here. You might look at your background and think, well, it's got some quite harsh edges. Well, the great thing about coffee is that you can re-wet it and sort of move it around a little bit. It takes a little bit of work, but you can actually soften off those edges. Obviously, you could also, if you've still got your coffee, you can work into the surface as well and correct any areas. If you do think they happen to be a little bit on the harsh side, then you can just soften bits off. Okay, and then when you are happy with your background, then you need to start adding to it. Now, what we're going to do, whoops, just trying to dry my surface, is look to see if you can find an area that will be a good place for the centre of some sort of fossilised form. So I know some of you have done this before, but you haven't done it for ages, so hopefully you'll be happy to do it again. This is quite a nice sort of, I don't know, a circle, so I'll maybe start here. I'm going to use my, or am I, because it doesn't appear to be working, my water-soluble pen, and I'm just going to start to draw. And it's not working. I think I might need to find another one. Right, I think I found one that actually... Oh, yeah, that's better. So I know this pen is water-soluble. I'm going to be using that to my advantage later. You might want to use something that isn't water-soluble and then work into it later with inks or something else. That's up to you. But anyway, I'm going to start thinking about what areas I want to be darker and add in a little bit more ink there. And then what I will be able to do will be wet that so the ink dissolves and move it around. Okay, so you can see it's sort of softening off the lines. If I do it where there isn't any, let's do a little one down here. Oh, that's a sweet little starting point there. So I've got my sort of ammonite here with my lines going in. Hopefully this will make it more obvious, so you can see that sort of tone, that grey tone being built up on top of the coffee. Okay, now when you get to a certain point where you are happy with what you've done, you want to introduce something a little more, then what you can do is start working into it with a little bit of bleach, either diluted or otherwise. If you go in where the ink is, then that's going to possibly make that a different colour. So this is going a bit of a purpley colour at the minute. It's also lifting off the ink that I drew in the centre of there. So if you go wrong, you can actually use it. But if you see, it's actually starting to lift the coffee as well. So do bear that in mind. Okay, so you could actually as well, if you wanted to, you could actually sort of make marks on here with the bleach, and then when that's dry you could possibly work on the top of that with pen. So that's another way that you can use it. This was one I did in my evening class, so that took me 2 hours to do. So you can see where I have continued to build up the darker areas. So I would add the ink, I would dissolve the ink, I would move it around, I would add more ink over the top once it's dry. Whatever you do, make sure that the paper is always dry before you go back over the top of it, or you will stop your pen from working. Okay, so that is one thing that you could do on your coffeed background. Okay, so if you don't want to do the second week on that coffeed background, there is an alternative. So if you are happy to work on one of the remaining sheets, I would repeat the same process, but looking at fungi, just because they lend themselves very beautifully to the colours and the interesting textures that you can get with the coffee and the bleach and what have you. But yeah, if you don't fancy doing that, then there's a variation on the theme that you could work with. So don't be tempted to try and work from your imagination. Do find a photo to work from, because the end result that you have is going to be so much more convincing and interesting, because you want essence of mushroom and you can't really just magic that up, no pun intended. Oh dear. Right, okay, so obviously it doesn't matter if it's not absolutely perfect. So see, I've gone a little bit wrong there, because it's an organic form and you can sort of get away with it. So you can start drawing with your quink and your stick. Have a look to see exactly what's happening with the gills. They're sort of all come in as though they're coming to like the centre of a clock, so we can do that. Obviously I'm not gonna, oh dear, that's terrible, but we'll keep going. Anyway, you get the idea. So as you know, quink isn't waterproof when it's dry, so we can then start to think about introducing some tone when you're you're sort of happy with the drawing. So what I've done here, I've sharpened my stick into a point. So I've got a brush on the other side, which is quite useful. So I can go in with some water and go up to this edge. I can wet it and the ink will re-wet, and then I can start to move it around a little bit to create some textures on the outside. I can do the same here with my water. I could just go over the whole lot and generate more tone. I can go in with a drier brush and try and be a little bit more controlled about it. It really is up to you. Now this area here is quite dark, so what I'm going to actually do is dip into the brush. I'm not going to go right up to that line because obviously it'll just flood. I'll sort that out later, but what I can do is I can get some neat Quink. Where's my water gone? It's out of sight. Get some plain water here to go in there to try and create a little bit of tonal variation. Okay, because this is smooth, whereas the gills are obviously very textured. You can, if you feel it is too wet, then you can do a little dab in, so that might help. Also might create a little bit of interesting texture if it's relevant. You could, of course, at this point, wrong one, oops, you can start thinking about working with the bleach as well. So I'm just going to dilute some bleach because I don't want to go in with it neat, but that is also going to create some tonal variation and some colour. So that can be really interesting. These areas here are still a little bit damp, but if I wanted to lift out the edge of the gills, then I can work in that way. If I overdo it, when it's dry, I should be able to go back over the top with the Quink to bring them back. Now, you have your coffee as well, so your coffee can be used to introduce some of those woodland colours. You can do a little bit of flicking and splatting. You might want to cover the areas where you don't want it to go. You can work the wet Quink into the coffee, and you can sort of introduce a little bit more water and push it around and see what happens. Just generally, just have a little play, see what happens. You can introduce your salt, you can introduce your, so this is coffee granules that I've just added neat water to. So what I think is that will give me a much stronger colour if I want it. You could bruise the paper so you end up with those lines. Let's put a little bit of salt on it and let it dry. Right, so that is the mushrooms. I would fill the whole page. Do work on watercolour paper because I don't think anything else is actually going to tolerate that. And hopefully, so here's some Blue Peters that I did with my evening class. This has actually been sprayed with the likes of one of these things. So if you do decide to do that, obviously be really careful, health and safety and all that sort of thing, but you might want to consider which areas you want to mask off as well. You could actually decant that into a much smaller, finer sprayer and see how that goes. The Sillet Bang is a bit heavy-handed when the spray comes out. The finest bottle that I've ever had was actually one from Waitrose, their spray bleach. But yeah, just have a little test first before you go on your beautiful piece of artwork that you've produced. And there's another one, which I didn't spend quite so much time on. And there was a third one, but I don't know what I've done with that. What have I done with that? I don't know. Let's have a look. God, I'm such a waffler. Okay, so that is what I would like you to do while I am away, and it would be really lovely if you were to post them. If you're on Instagram, you could probably post them onto Instagram and hashtag Jo Shepherd Teaches, or pop them onto Facebook so I can have a look. That would be really great. Or you could WhatsApp me or something like that. Yeah, have fun. Enjoy. Bye bye.